It's time for What Should We?
The podcast all about the titles you need. Join three book lovers
and a guest.
It's the remix. You know what you should read.
It's time for What You Should Read, the podcast all about the titles you need. Join three book lovers and a guest as they cover all the best new titles to enjoy with your tea.
I have that, but I haven't read it yet.
Hi, I'm Julia.
I'm Rachel.
And I'm Kelly.
And this is What You Should Read,
the podcast where we should all over our books.
Good morning, should-heads. Today we are going to be discussing short stories, but I don't think this will be a short episode. I actually think this one might be. We'll see. But we have a lot of book news to talk about. So, and I think the discussion about short stories will be interesting. So buckle up.
Absolutely.
But first, Kelly, what are you reading this week?
I just started When These Stars Go Dark by Paula McLain. It is one of my book of the month books, and she is known for historical fiction, which I generally do not like as much. But this is I guess, kind of mystery thriller about a woman whose child dies under somewhat mysterious circumstances. She blames herself, and now she's investigating a missing child case. I'm not very far in. I'm like maybe 50 pages in tops. So much of the story is ahead. I'm very excited to see where it goes.
Nice. Sounds good. Rachel, what about you?
Well, I have had another crazy busy week at work, so I haven't read much. But I did finish The Beekeeper's Apprentice, that audiobook. So my new audiobook I'm reading is an advanced listening copy. It is Anna K., the sequel to Anna K. that I read a few weeks ago. So it's called Anna K. Away. And it's narrated by Jenna Ushkowitz, just like the first one. And it's really, really good so far.
By Jenny Lee, right?
Yeah, the author's Jenny Lee.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I am actually listening to Anna K. right now based on your recommendation, Rach, and I'm about halfway through it. I'm listening to it from Libro FM, and I'm really enjoying it. And I also have the ALC for Anna K. Away, so that's why I'm listening to Anna K. right now, so that I can get to that next. I'm also reading an e-galley of Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. And I got a copy from NetGalley, and the book comes out in May, and I love it. I'm only 10% in, but I can already tell I'm going to give it 5 stars. If you loved The Martian, which I did, I read that book like 3 times. I loved it so much. Yeah, I know. I don't usually reread, but I read it and then I listened to it on audiobook. And I think I just really enjoyed the narrator. So I think I listened to it a couple times, but I was on like this sci-fi kick a few years ago. It was back before it might've been like 6 years ago, actually, because it was before I moved into the house. I was still in my apartment, but I was reading all these sci-fi books, and that was one of them. So I really enjoyed The Martian, and this book is reminiscent of that tone. His second book, I think was called Artemis or something like that. I DNF'd it. I did not like it. It was a very different book. So this is like a return to form. So if you enjoyed The Martian and you didn't enjoy Andy Weir's second book, I would highly recommend coming back to Project Hail Mary, because it's great. It's about this guy. He wakes up and he doesn't know where he is or who he is. He's in this like lab, and he can't remember his name, and he's with his crew, but everyone else on his crew is dead, and he needs to figure out what his mission is. And his mission is to save the world, but I won't go into like what the details are, because you kind of like his memories start to come back, so you learn along with him. It's so good and funny. It's really funny. So
sounds great. I still haven't read The Martian, so.
Did you watch the movie?
I've seen parts of it.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I loved it. It's just my type of book. It's funny. And it's like science fiction, but he does such a good job of making you feel like, oh, this could happen, even though I'm sure there's funny. With science fiction, they do funny stuff with the science to make it make sense. But yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
We should do an episode sometime on like the book trends we've had through our lives, like the kind of rabbit holes we go down.
Yeah.
Because you just said you were having like a science fiction kick, and I'm like, oh yes, all through high school, I was very big on mysteries.
Yeah. Me too. Oh my gosh, I had a total Agatha Christie rabbit hole in high school. Like that's how I have so many of her books.
Yeah. Oh, have you read the new ones that Sophie Hannah wrote?
No.
They're apparently really good.
I'm sure.
I've read some of Agatha Christie's like actual books.
Yeah.
Yeah, so but
That's great.
this is me trying to push book news just a little bit farther away.
You're not ready.
Well, you know how we had like a week where it was really good and it was like, oh, things we love are getting adapted and it's great. Well,
that's over.
It's over.
That was fun while it lasted.
And it's fine. You can't just always talk about good things.
Right.
And here we are with book news, not good things.
All right, so let us have it, Kelly. What's the book name?
All right. So one of the police officers who killed Breonna Taylor, Jonathan Mattingly, has a book deal. And it has been billed as the true story of what happened that night. And I just want to say, if that book says anything other than we made a horrible mistake and were careless and we killed an innocent woman and then slandered her boyfriend for fun, I don't think it'll be the true story of what happened that night. And it will be published by a small conservative press. And the problem is that press has a distribution deal with Simon & Schuster. And when this broke, a lot of people, both readers and authors, I know Jennifer Weiner was one who is a Simon & Schuster author, Jodi Picoult, who is not, but she also commented like, do better. And a lot of people pointed out that over the past year when this kept happening, Simon & Schuster tweeted, we stand with Black authors and readers and, Black Lives Matter. And people were like, well, that didn't age well, did it, Simon & Schuster? And so now they have announced that they will not be distributing this book. And they were like, also, we're not publishing it. We would have been distributing it. And that's different. But it's one of the big 5 publishers. So like, really, would it be that different?
Not really.
Because, yeah, it's getting that press more books and more attention than they otherwise could afford.
Right.
So there's that.
It's putting it in more people's hands.
Right. But speaking of that, then there's a little bit of a discussion going on Twitter that it's really not great that we were discussing this, even though Simon & Schuster then backed out of distributing it, because it's a small press that no one has heard of, and an officer that I would say most people probably don't know by name, and no one would have known about it if we weren't discussing it on Twitter. And all that does is call more attention to the book, which will probably get people who maybe wouldn't otherwise have known about it to try and read it.
I disagree with that. This was always going to be a controversy. That is why that publisher signed the book to get notoriety, because they are a little known publisher, and they were like, well, now we won't be. That's why they did it. So I don't agree that just talking about it brings more attention to it. I mean, this was a huge national story. There's no way it can't, this is news. We have to talk about it, and it's disgusting. And, the more people that say I'm disgusted by this, don't buy it, don't carry it in your bookstore. Like,
right.
We need that, otherwise, if it just flew under the radar, it might just like be on bookshelves and booksellers wouldn't pay close enough attention, or I don't know. But yeah, I'm glad that Simon & Schuster made that decision to stop distributing it. I think they should drop that press. I think they should break their contract and just, pay whatever penalty they have to for ending the contract early and cut ties with them. That's disgusting.
I would agree. And I would say too, you can't say, oh, this gives it more attention, when if nobody was talking about it, Simon & Schuster would still have been distributing
exactly.
it. And they gave Mike Pence a book deal. That was Simon & Schuster too. So, I mean, clearly they're maybe not as progressive as maybe some of us would hope.
Right.
Yeah.
But wait, there's more.
Rachel, were you going to say something first?
Sorry.
I was just gonna agree with the fact that that book never would have flew under the radar.
Yeah.
And you know, not a book about the Breonna Taylor murder, because like it can't have. There's no way that would have stayed obscure.
Right.
So it's good we caught it early.
Yes,
Definitely. And I mean, it's also because, of course, this has come up as well. It is not a First Amendment issue because you are not guaranteed a book deal or that one of the big 5 publishers will distribute your book. Like, that's not a thing.
Yeah,
It's not
nothing
like
in the First Amendment about that.
Right, exactly. And I mean, honestly, even if in the book he admits that, you know, yes, he straight up murdered Breonna Taylor, you know, he's not going to, if he were to get in trouble, it would be for admitting to murder, not for writing a book.
Mm-hmm.
It would be writing a book in which he admitted to murder. So, you know, still not a First Amendment issue.
We call that a confession.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I would say that if I were Breonna Taylor's family, I would consider bringing a civil lawsuit against him, because as we learned from O.J. Simpson, you're not allowed to profit from your crimes, which is why when he published the book, If I Did It, that money all went to Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson's family. So, you know, maybe time for a civil lawsuit, and then, you know, if he's found guilty, that's profiting from a crime, and all that money can belong to you. I am not a legal expert. Do not listen to me.
Oh, by the way, allegedly on everything, right?
Yes.
I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
For our 40 listeners.
I would just like to point out that I watched Grey's Anatomy, not How to Get Away with Murder, so I am a medical expert, not a legal one.
Good to know. Good to know.
Yeah. But also, so Twitter, book Twitter specifically, is and always has been a large controversial place. And over the past couple weeks, an author named Lauren Huff wrote a book called, I think, Leaving is Not the Hardest Thing. It's a similar title, if it's not that, and it's about her getting out of the Children of God cult, which, as you know, I'm very into cults, and it would be a book that I probably would have loved, except that she got mad that a book blogger or reviewer on Goodreads gave her 4.5 stars, shared a screenshot of the review, said something, and we'll have links to the screenshots in our show notes, but basically said something about how it's good to see that some people are still like proving they're tough or something by only giving 4 stars to a book. I know Grow Up was in a subsequent tweet.
Yeah.
She called book reviewers nerds on a power trip.
That's right. I do remember that. Yeah. It's
cool.
Great. And
fighting the good fight.
Yeah, exactly. And so book Twitter and Goodreads book reviewers were like, oh, you don't like 4 stars? Okay. And I wish I had known what her Goodreads rating was before that, but it is now, I think, 1.7 something.
It's 2.01 right now.
Ooh, it's rebounding though, because its lowest was 1.6, I think. 1.61, because people were like, oh, you don't like us? Okay, we don't like you either. And probably this would have just quietly kept rebounding, except now Lauren is back on Twitter, quote retweeting everybody who's like, please don't be jerks to us, and getting her followers to go after people. And just also, can we please stop using the phrase Goodreads trolls, because it's not accurate, and it's really repetitive, and frankly, if that's how this author has to communicate, I don't want to read her book anyway, even though I really like cults.
Yeah, there's a couple of things this brings up for me. I mean, it's ridiculous that she was mad about a 4-star review. And it was the nicest review too. It was like, yeah, I gave it 4.5 too. And I rounded down. And someone else was like, yeah, I rounded up. Like they were just nice reviews. This woman's book has a 5-star review from Roxane Gay right at the top of its Goodreads page. She could have left well enough alone. Like this book probably would have over 4 stars on Goodreads today if she didn't bother worrying about what a random person on Goodreads said. But she's doubled down. And what I find interesting is that she is saying that Goodreads reviewers are on a power trip about this. And really, she has the power in this situation. And she chose, as a published author with a 5-star review from someone with as much clout as Roxane Gay, she chose to put someone on blast who's not well known, who does not post reviews for money. Like we don't post Goodreads reviews because it makes us a lot of money, and we don't do it for clout. She's claiming, she retweeted this one tweet that enraged me. It was you people who, post reviews for free, just doing it for clout, you're trash, giving people like on this power trip. She retweeted that. And I was like, no, authors are the ones with the power.
Right.
And that's why we're so upset that you did this. Because you have a big fancy publisher. Vintage Books is, publishing her book. They have a whole marketing staff. Like, this book will be fine. It will still sell regardless of what's on Goodreads and what she put out on Twitter. It does sound like a really good book. I'm also really mad that she did this because otherwise I probably would have gone out and bought this week because it does sound great. But what it also brings up for me is just my anxiety about posting less than 5 stars on any book, because I am afraid that an author will see it and will call me a jerk, which is crazy. It's like, a 3 and a 4-star rating should not cause anyone anxiety. It's just how you feel about a book. And that should be okay.
I fully agree.
I agree. I think I don't understand where she's coming from now either. Like before, she definitely had a big insecure moment where she was like, how dare these people like my book enough to give it 4 stars, but not like it enough to give it 5. Because she said something like, they want to show they're super tough by not giving it 5 stars and only giving it 4 because, they have to fall in love to give a book 5 stars. And it's like, I mean, people have their own rating. It's so arbitrary.
Yeah.
And it's just an opinion about your book. Reviewer spaces are for readers, not authors. And now she's just like, I've thought a lot about this. And, people think that this was about a 4-star review. It wasn't. I'm like, yes, it was.
It was. That's the only thing this was about.
Yeah. I don't understand where she's coming from now. Like at this point.
I think where she's coming from is that then everyone decided to go and give her book 1 stars after not reading it, which I will say, and I'm curious what you two think about this. I don't agree with that. I don't think that you should rate a book 1 star just because the author is problematic. And in this case, she's being a jerk, and I don't agree with what she's doing, but I do think we should be rating books on Goodreads and not authors. Like if you don't support that author, I've seen some people just like write a review without a rating. I'm fully in support of that because that way you're like getting information out that other readers might want to know, but you're not tanking the book's star rating. Because I do think, I don't know, it's hard. It's kind of like the question about separating the art from the artist, I guess. But I don't think like my decision to purchase a book has nothing to do with the star number is on Goodreads. It really doesn't. Like I don't think it does for many people either. But what do you think? Like, do you agree like with people like giving it 1 stars if they haven't read it?
I think in this case only, or in cases like this only, I should say, it's like Kelly said, oh, you didn't like a 4-star review? Well, how do you feel about a 1 star? Like, it's like, I don't know. I mean, obviously, like, these people don't know the author, and she obviously cares what people think.
Right.
But it's almost like you have to be that petty or people don't understand why they're wrong.
Yeah.
And I probably put too much stock into Goodreads scores because if I see something less than 3 stars, I'm probably not going to pick it up. Unless it was personally recommended to me by a friend who knows my reading tastes.
But if I saw this and I was like, oh, Roxane gave it 5 stars, but it's rated super low, then I'm going to look into it, obviously. And if I don't care about book Twitter, I might say like, oh, whatever, and just buy it. But I do follow book Twitter, so I do know. Kelly, what do you think?
Well, I have a couple thoughts. One, I am on her Twitter page right now, and she retweeted something that someone tweeted with the hashtag why people suck. And it is a screenshot of 4 different books. Okay, so the complete prose of Woody Allen is 3.99 on Goodreads. Woody Allen is 3.99 on Goodreads. Mein Kampf, you all know that, is 3.18 on Twitter, and Leaving Isn't the Hardest Thing is 1.91 on Twitter. And it's like, okay, first of all, none of those are particularly great. And I also don't know that you necessarily want to compare, and I know the point they're making because it's not subtle, but maybe don't put the person you're defending in a screenshot with Woody Allen and Hitler. By the way.
Yeah.
But also,
you retweeted that?
Yeah, she retweeted that. I am on her page. I'm not just looking at, I'm not just looking at things about
she's spiraling. This is she's really spiraling. This is an immature response through and through, from top to bottom, from beginning to end. The immaturity is just But part of me is like, okay, she grew up in a cult, right? Like her book is a series of essays about her life and getting out of this cult that she was in from childhood, and then like her life after that. And I just wonder if there's something about how she grew up and like her development that makes her unable to deal with like people in a like reasonable manner. That doesn't make it okay. Like when people tell you like, hey, stop doing this, like hopefully you would think someone would have enough critical thinking skills to like take a step back and be like, I need to get off Twitter and not do this anymore. But she is doubling down.
I mean, she really does. Okay, so I'm going to read one more tweet of hers and then like a quote retweet she did. She said, and I don't know what happens now. At Goodreads is just fucking letting it happen. Thousands of people bragging they won't read the book, TikTok videos of the hilarity that is murdering my one goddamn dream, Insta posts about my being problematic. And someone tweeted at her, I love the book, sorry about the assholes. And she quote retweeted, they have to live with being insignificant. And it's like, dude, you are murdering your goddamn dream.
Oh, that's terrible.
And like, I mean, honestly, if you're going to be like, oh, they're insignificant, maybe stop talking about it.
Stop being so cruel. Yeah.
And I mean, also like, they're not, whatever her publicist is making, it is not enough. Like you give her publicist like a 2-week vacation to anywhere she wants to go.
Yeah, I would be crying into my wine if I was that publicist.
I mean, I just like, I'm kind of laughing about it, but I just picture her waking up maybe around now, 11 o'clock on a Sunday, maybe doing a little stretch and thinking about the coffee she's going to eat and like maybe go to brunch with some friends now that a lot of people are vaccinated. Oh, what a good day. I'm going to just hop on Twitter. And then her day just exploded into flames.
Yeah, she probably is in her late 20s, living in New York. You're right. Like it's a nice Sunday, bottomless mimosas time, outdoor brunch. And
I mean, and I'm sure after it happened, what was it, last week? I'm sure she was like, hey, so just let it go. It's fine. Yeah. It'll burn itself out. Someone will do something. Probably some young adult author is going to end up like criticizing a
Yeah.
teenager or like
I will say
plagiarize
though,
something.
the fact that she did this recent tweet where she's like, I'm going to fight back. And like all these people are coming to her defense and she's, you know, blocking anyone who says anything against her. That is when her reviews and ratings started to rebound on Goodreads. So if that's what she really cares about, I see why she's doing it. It's just, she's being such a jerk. And I don't know. I don't know. And like, right, we were talking about this morning. If she hadn't said anything after this mistake, if she would just like been like, oh, my bad, sorry, I'm gonna get off Twitter and just like, you know, do some deep breathing. We would have forgotten about this. I probably would have bought this book in a month or so because I would have forgotten her name and been like, I have a really bad memory. I've done that before. Like you guys have warned me about certain authors and I'm like, oh, I'm never reading them. And then like a month later, I buy the book because it sounds good. And I was like, oh, I forgot that was the author.
Yeah. Because what she did in the beginning was not problematic. It wasn't, she wasn't racist. She wasn't classist. She wasn't like, you know, doing anything that was like, oh, you're an awful person. She was just like, I said this to you guys earlier too, like I would have taken the excuse of, you know what, I got high, I was stoned off my ass, and I was just tweeting stupid things and I did a dumb thing.
Okay, but who goes on a Twitter rant when they're high?
Right.
When they're stoned.
I would have been like, oh yeah, makes sense. Okay. And then forgotten all about it.
Yeah.
But answering a question you asked earlier, for me personally, my Goodreads reviews and ratings are very, very, they're very random. There's nothing that makes real sense about them. Sometimes it's, I loved this book so much, I can't even talk about it like a normal person. I sound actually like ridiculous, but I need everybody to read this book. Like say Tiny Beautiful Things by Cheryl Strayed, which you have all heard me talk about. And sometimes it's, I haven't really been reading lately, and I read this book in no time at all, and it was exactly what I needed, and I love it. 5 stars, everybody read it. But I have one time 1-starred a book I did not read, and that was Kathleen Hale is a Crazy Stalker, which is her book of essays, including the story about how she basically found a book blogger's personal information and went to her house. And she didn't do anything besides go to the house, but I mean, really, that's enough. And it was around the same time there was an author in the UK who didn't like a review, and they showed up at the bookstore, I think, where the person who left the review worked. And I want to say like assaulted them, like hit them in the head. And, you know, so that was a fun time for book bloggers everywhere. So when she was profiting off that by her book of essays, we were all like, oh, fuck no. Or actually, as the hashtag was, oh, hail no. And so I did 1-star it. I don't feel bad about it. I would do it again. I have not 1-starred Lauren Huff, but I would definitely 1-star Kathleen Hale again.
Yeah, it's like this, you know, as far, you know, her first Twitter rant, as far as that goes, like, obviously if it had left it there, like that's not enough reason for me to want to like 1-star a person. She didn't stalk the reviewer, like Kelly was saying. She didn't go Kathleen Hale on them, but like we don't know how far these authors might go. So when they speak out at all against reviewers, it's scary. And it's like there are people that have gotten hurt, and there are people that have committed crimes because authors can't handle less than perfect reviews. And it's like, we don't know her in her capacity. So I get why people are upset.
Yeah, for sure. So we're going to have the author on to talk. No, I'm just kidding.
When we come back.
And she's here. She's here.
Oh boy.
Should we move on?
Let's talk about recent acquisitions.
Yeah.
So recent acquisitions is the segment where we discuss the books we've recently bought, borrowed, or been given. Julia, why don't you start us off?
My book of the month box finally came. Yay. So I got What Comes After by Joanne Tompkins. I think it's a debut. I'm not exactly sure. It's a family drama. after two teenagers die and like secrets come out, and the two families live near each other. It sounded really good. So I'm excited to read that. And then I got Arsenic and Adobo by Mia Manansala, who I believe is Filipino. And it's a mystery, which I'm really excited about. Murder mystery. And then collection of short stories, Love and Color by Bolu Babalola, which I think Rachael, you talked about last week. You got this in your box too. And it's mythical tales from around the world retold. So it's short stories and retellings. So right up my alley. If the box hadn't come so late, I probably would have already read this. I think it's going to be my next read. So, and perfect to discuss today since we're talking about short stories.
Perfect.
So yeah, those are my recent acquisitions.
Great. Kelly, what about you?
I got the Mary Shelley Club by Goldy Moldavsky. And it is a young adult thriller. So really my favorite thing right now. It is about a girl who survived a terrifying assault in her home, basically. She was home alone. Her mom was at a party, and two people broke in masks and attacked her.
Whoa.
One of them ends up dying. It was self-defense, but still dead. And she ends up in a new town, not super far away, but like they end up moving to New York, the city. And she joins this club, the Mary Shelley Club, which is a secret club of people who love horror movies and committing pranks on people. Like scary pranks on people. And like they pick their targets, they figure out like what is likely to scare them the most, and then do it. And it's over when the person screams. They call them fear tests. And then the members of the club like kind of rate everything based on like the inventiveness of what happens and everything. Of course things end up completely out of control. It's bonkers, but I loved it. It's 467 pages, and I read it in about 24 hours.
Wow.
So I loved. I
Sounds
recommend.
Interesting.
It's really fun.
Well, I picked up a bunch of audiobooks. I used my Libro FM credit this month to get Into Thin Air by Jon Krakauer. I was talking on one of the last episodes about this book coming out this month about Everest, The Next Everest by Jim Davidson. And Julia, you were like, have you read Jon Krakauer's books? And I was like, no, but I want to. So I did pick up the audiobook for Into Thin Air, which is his Everest book. So I'm in an Everest mood, I guess. And then I got a bunch of advanced listening copies and new releases through Libro FM. So I got Libertie by Kaitlyn Greenidge, which was a book of the month pick also, but I didn't get it in my box. So I got the audiobook. I got 1, 2, 3 by Laurie Frankel, which is about triplets, I think, which is interesting. What, Julia? You're muted. You're muted.
Sorry. I also picked up those on Libro FM. Yeah, it's about triplets, and they live in a town where it sounds like the mom had like an Erin Brockovich moment 17 years ago, where like the water was turning green and she like, went on a crusade, and and now it's like later on.
Right. And then I got Mirrorland by Carole Johnstone, The Hill We Climb by Amanda Gorman and Oprah Winfrey, and then Anna K. Away, of course.
Awesome. I love Libro FM. They have the best app, I will say, for getting audio, for listening to audiobooks, because when you change your reading speed, which I like to do, it recalculates how long you have, and I'm a control freak, and I like knowing these things. But shitheads, go to our Instagram or Twitter, and we have a giveaway going with Libro FM right now, so you can get 3 months free. 3 months and when you have like a monthly membership, you get so you'll get 3 book credits, I think, for free. So that's amazing. So if you like audiobooks, just go to our Instagram or Twitter or both, or leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, and you get multiple ways to enter. And we're going to do a drawing next week. So definitely check that out.
Yeah, I love Libro FM too, because it's the same price as Audible, but you get books through like local bookstores. Like help support local bookshops and not Amazon.
Exactly.
Yes, I actually should update my recently acquired recent acquisitions, because I also got those Libro FM books, but I also bought my first one, a recommendation from a friend of mine, my friend Janine, Rosemary's Baby, as read by Mia Farrow, which is the best thing ever. I haven't listened yet, but I will, and I'm very excited.
Yeah, cool.
Awesome. Right. All right. Well, we are going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we are going to be talking about short stories, and do we like them? Do we read them? And which ones do we recommend? So stick around and we'll be right back.
You know what you should read.
It's time for
And we
What
are
You Should
back.
Read,
And today we are
podcast all
discussing
about
short
titles.
story collections. And this is a topic that I'm really interested in because I do read a lot of short story collections and I love them. And I'm curious to hear from you two. Do you read collections of short stories? Is that something that you gravitate towards? Rachel, we'll start with you.
Not really. I mean, I have read a few collections of short stories. Off the top of my head, I can only think of one, which I read last year. The Her Bodies and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado, but I know I've read others like long time ago. It's not something I normally gravitate towards, and I feel like it's not something also that I like see or hear about a lot either. So maybe it's partially that it's not visible to me, whether it's through Goodreads algorithms or whatever. Or if it's something I don't like. I don't think I don't like them.
Yeah.
I've just never really sought them out.
Mm-hmm.
I do think, like, I do remember in school, like middle school and high school and English class, there would be a lot of short stories because you could just like do it during class. Like you could have one class lesson all about a short story.
Yeah.
Where you would read it and analyze it. And I didn't like not having time to read the book. Like with a book, we would have like a week or two to read the book and then we'd start analyzing it. Where for a short story, I've always felt very like, I don't know, I just read it. Give me a moment.
Right. Give me some time to process.
Yeah. So
and then when you have a whole collection of short stories, it's like
Mhm.
once you're done that one, you're on to the next one. So
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Mm.
I guess I'd have to read more to really know if I like it.
Kelly, what about you?
I don't like them. Which is weird because I like essay collections,
Mm-hmm.
which, really not that different if you think about it. But yeah, I'm not particularly drawn to short story collections. I've read all of Stephen King's and enjoyed them well enough, but I mean, by and large,
But he's your
really
favorite
not a fan.
author. So
He is my favorite author, yeah. And I think I've read and if any author I like puts out a short story collection, I generally do read it and I enjoy them, but just by and large, give me a book, please. A novel with these characters, a lot of time with them. Ideally also maybe a like a sequel or companion novel. Like I don't want 20 pages with
Right.
people. I want like hundreds of pages with people.
Yeah, I get that. Like I get the wanting more from especially if you like the world that the author has built or the characters they've created. For me though, that's kind of what I love about short stories is I love being left wanting more. I cannot stand when I'm reading a novel and the first 50 pages or so are great and I'm in it and I'm like, this is a 5-star read. I just know it. And then it just starts to drag and I get like really upset because I'm like, no, I was enjoying this so much and now I'm not, and I'm going to stick with it because I have hopes that it will pick up again. And sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. But with a short story, you don't have those like ups and downs as much. I mean, if you don't like it, you know pretty quickly, and then it's over pretty quickly. And you can say like, oh, I didn't like that as much, but you know what? I didn't spend that much time on it, so it doesn't feel like as much of an investment. And like generally when I have and I do prefer a short story collection that's all written by the same author. Like I would say anthologies, I'm not as drawn to. I've tried a few of them, and I'm not as drawn to that because if I don't like one author's voice, it kind of takes me out of the experience.
Right.
But what I love is an author whose voice I'm really enjoying, and like having a whole collection and like kind of trying to find the themes and the threads between them that connect them. I love that. So I would say there are definitely, I have a lot of recommendations for what you should read for short story collections. But yeah, for me, I don't know. I love them.
Nice.
Do you think that it's interesting, Rachel, what you said, I think about the algorithm just not showing you them enough. Like that's interesting to me because I agree. I don't think I don't think short story collections are really hyped up a lot on like in like the book community.
Right. Like BookTube and all that. You don't see it a lot.
Yeah. Like there are a few content creators that talk about them a lot, but like on Bookstagram or whatever, I don't see. But yeah, it's interesting like why publisher, and I also don't think publishers put a lot of as much marketing behind them as novels. So I think they're probably just generally less popular than novels are in general.
That makes sense. Yeah. And it's funny because I knew we were doing this episode is probably the biggest reason why I got Love and Color from Book of the Month this month, because I was like, all right, well, it's Book of the Month pick. And I usually like the picks that I get from there. And it's short stories, so it's something to try. And it's retellings. So, you know, it's probably tales I'm familiar with, just in a new context or a new lens. So that might be... So I'm looking forward to trying that and see if I enjoy it in that forum, like in that kind of setting.
The other thing that's nice about short stories is you can put it down after one story and then come back to it whenever. So if you just need like a break, if you're reading a book, that another book, like a novel, and you just kind of want a brain break, you could just pick that short story up, and it doesn't feel like as much of an investment of your time. Just like, oh, I'll just read a story from this one.
That's another good point.
Yeah. Well, should I give you all some recommendations and see if I can convince you to give short stories another chance? Kelly, you're looking very skeptical.
I was very excited when I saw Love and Color because I was like, oh my God, Julia's going to get that one for sure.
I did. Nice. Okay, well, I have a lot of recommendations for you both and for our listeners. So I'll try to make my case. So the first book, I'm going to combine these two because these are both new releases and they were both nominated for the Story Prize for good reason in 2020. So that's The Office of Historical Correction. I just bumped my face with the book. The Office of Historical Corrections by Danielle Evans. This is actually a novella and stories in one. Kelly, did you read this? Actually, I can't remember if you did.
I have that, but I haven't read it.
Okay, good. So this one, and also The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Disha Pilia. Kelly, especially, I think you would enjoy both of these. They both deal with race and racism in different ways. So in The Office of Historical Corrections, she is looking at in most of these stories, it's more about like there's more of like a current events or like political tinge to them. Like there's this one story that actually follows this college girl who's white, and she is kind of just like floating through life and not really like paying attention to the world around her. And her boyfriend gives her a Confederate flag bikini and to wear to the beach one day. Cause she's like, oh, I don't have a bathing suit. He's like, oh, I'll buy you one. And he buys it for her. And it's like Confederate. Yeah. They're in Florida. Right. And so she's like, oh, whatever. And she puts it on and takes a selfie and like posts it. And then of course, like her goes back to school and they're like, this was bad. And like students are really upset. And then she like it's interesting how Danielle Evans, I think, gets inside this girl's head, and the girl's just like, well, I don't really know anything about the Confederate flag, but I'm going to pretend that I care and that I like care about free speech. And so it's just wild, and it's infuriating, but it's like really, really interesting. And then there's another, and then the titular story, the novella, she makes up this like department that's called the Office of Historical Corrections. This woman's job is to like go around and be like at different landmarks, or if anything's like written out about that it's like the history of this thing is this, she's like, actually that's wrong, and she like writes a little post-it, and like she's like, can I speak to the manager, and like corrects.
Okay, that's amazing.
But then there's this like one story that's actually like a huge deal. Like a man was maybe killed like years ago, but they don't like, the story isn't like not adding up. So it puts her in danger. So it's like a really like suspenseful story, as well as being just being really like well written and interesting. So I would say, Kelly, I think you would enjoy that one. And then The Secret Lives of Church Ladies, which I had from the library, so I don't have it anymore, but that one's more about love and relationships and religion. And in every story, it's a different woman or girl's perspective, and the church is somehow central to her life. And just like sex and how these inner lives or these secret lives of these women, and how they are being carried out in secret, the Secret Lives of Church Ladies. So that one was really good too. That one won the story prize, which I definitely understand why.
So I didn't realize that was a short story collection. I thought it was a novel. So that's interesting.
The Disha Pilia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. Short stories. And they're all so good. And it's really, the book itself is short. It didn't take me long to read, and it was fantastic.
Do you have that one? Or is it on like your Kindle or something?
I got it from the library.
Oh, okay.
But I have the Office of I should buy a copy actually, but I have the Office of Historical Corrections if you want to borrow that one.
Cool.
Okay. And then the next recommendation I have is probably more for Rachael, because it's more sci-fi. So it's Ted Chiang's Exhalation. And I don't have my copy here. I loaned it to a friend, but it was on Barack Obama's list of best books he read, I think in 2019. Which is why I picked it up. And I was like, ooh, a short story collection. And then I realized it's the author of, what's that movie with, about the aliens? Arrival. He wrote the short story Arrival, which the movie is based on.
Okay.
So Exhalation is his follow-up collection of stories. And it's like every story is like an episode of that show Black Mirror.
Whoa.
Yeah. Which is like looking at like a dystopian or technology that we don't have, and like kind of commenting on it as like kind of like Clara and the Sun, right? Like, so all of these like there's this one story about parallel worlds, and they've developed this technology where you can talk to people in other worlds through like an iPad type of device. And so like this couple where they each lost their spouse in the other world, and so they can talk to each other, like they can talk to the spouse that died because they're doppelgangers in another world. And it's just like really, really interesting. And then there's another story about like these like avatars like that are in this video, like this VR game, right? That they find a way to bring those characters into the physical world and like have them as pets. And it's just like about like the morality of that and whatnot. So definitely recommend Ted Chiang's Exhalation.
Wow. I'm looking it up on Goodreads right now.
Yeah. And that one was one that I just like, I read it early 2020. So before the world closed up. And then I was like, oh, this would have been a good premise for one of his stories. So maybe he'll write about, I would love to see some stories from him about 2020.
Yeah.
And I also need to read his other book, Arrival.
Yeah, that sounds, I've never seen the movie, but everybody loves it. So I should.
So good. And then, so you know the author Jhumpa Lahiri, she wrote The Namesake. So she has 2 short story collections, and she actually won the Pulitzer in 2000 for Interpreter of Maladies, which was her debut book. This is the book that got me into short stories. I read it when I was, I think, in graduate school or right after, because I was living in Boston. She's a Massachusetts-based author, and she was, I think, born in India or Pakistan, and then was raised in New England. And she's just a beautiful writer. So if you love stories about families and relationships and different cultures, I would say that definitely pick up her books. She writes a lot about the Indian American experience, the immigrant experience, children of immigrants. And she's just a beautiful writer. I mean, I love her novels too. The Lowlands was a really good book, but I think I like her short story collections better. So she has 2. She has Interpreter of Maladies, and then she also has Unaccustomed Earth. I read these both a long time ago, but I picked up Interpreter of Maladies again this week and just like read a couple of the stories again. I was just like, oh yeah, I remember these is so good. Like there's this one story about this woman and her husband, they have an arranged marriage and they're starting to like get on each other's nerves. And they just moved into this house, and she keeps finding all these like Catholic paraphernalia that the previous owners left behind. And she's like, oh, this is so like quirky. I'm going to put these up on the mantle. And she has this like, her name's Twinkle. Her name is literally Twinkle. And she has this zest for life that her husband doesn't have. He's very by the book. He's like an MIT professor or whatever. He's just like, why are you doing this? We're not Catholic. She's like, no, I know we're Hindu, but I'm just going to like put it up. And like, it's funny, you know, he's like, we don't want the neighbors to see this. And it's just, I don't know. It's like, just like a slice of life, you know, like looking at people's lives and their inner thoughts. So I love her so much. So yeah, Rachel, I think you especially would love her books.
Great.
Kelly, have you read Look Both Ways by Jason Reynolds?
Yes.
Okay, that's a collection of short stories.
It's a novel in vignettes, but
okay, yeah, that's true. So I mean, that's cool because it's like a different story each story is from a different block, but yes, the same neighborhood. Yeah. Okay.
That is a good workaround for my no short stories.
Yeah, that's why I was thinking. And I know you love him as well. So
I do.
Yeah. The other one I would recommend for you, Kelly, is One More Thing, Stories and Other Stories by BJ Novak, who was on The Office.
Yes, Ryan, I know.
Yeah.
What's that one? I'm sorry.
One More Thing.
One More Thing.
Stories and Other Stories. There are like 50 stories in this book. So some of them are like some of them are literally just a paragraph or 2 long. Like there's one that's like, being young was her thing, but every year, more and more women tried to take her thing. And she started to think that maybe she should find another thing, but she kept that quiet because even thinking that thing meant that her thing wasn't really her thing anymore. It's just like, some of them, they're just so meta, you know? And then there's one called Dark Matter, where this young man, he's like a millennial, he's on this planetarium tour and he's not really paying attention until the end. And then the tour guide says, and it's really interesting that 90% of the world is dark matter, but we don't even know what dark matter is. And the guy on the tour, the narrator, is like, I was looking at the smug face of the tour guide and I knew he did know what dark matter was. And I was going to get him to tell me. So he like waits until everyone leaves. And then he goes up to the tour guide. He's like, oh, can you answer this other question over here behind this, like, you know, corridor? I really need your expertise. And the tour guide's like, sure. And so they like go around the corner. He like grabs his lanyard and like chokes him. He's like, tell me what dark matter is. I know, you know. He's like, I don't know. And he's like, yes, you do. And he's like, okay, I'll tell you. He's like, come to my office, right? I'll tell you what dark matter is. I'll explain it to you. And the guy's like, yes, you know, I'm going to find out. I'm so excited. And he gets to the office and then like the guy's like, okay, here's what dark matter is. And then the narrator just like tunes the whole thing out because like his phone's buzzing, he's thinking about his friends, he's distracted about his weekend plans, the guy's kind of boring, and so by the end the tour guide's like got tears in his eyes, he's like, I'm so glad someone else knows this now, like
oh god.
So it's all stories that are just like kind of, like so funny and just I don't know, like I love the way his mind works. I do think some of the stories like I mean this was published like 10 years ago, so I think some of the jokes I would probably cringe a little bit at this point, but not, I mean it's really fun and like that kind of like humor from the days of The Office and Parks and Rec and that sort of thing, so I would recommend that.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah. So those are some of my recommendations for short stories. Hopefully there's something for everyone there. Kelly, are there any that you think you might read?
Well, I loved Look Both Ways. Okay. And if he did a short story collection, I would absolutely read it. I would read everything he writes. Yeah. I definitely want to read Office of Historical Corrections, which I already have. Okay, but good. I mean, the others all sound really good too. I know I read The Namesake. I might have actually read Interpreter of Maladies, but I'm not. I don't know. I know I read The Namesake, and then I probably looked to see if she had written anything else. And I know Interpreter of Maladies was first, right? Like the short stories. Then
so and then The Namesake. And then Unaccustomed Earth, and then The Lowlands. And now she has a book that she literally learned Italian so that she could write in another language. She's a genius. Yeah. I haven't read that one though. Because it just got translated into English.
Yeah. Cool.
Rachel, what about you?
Did she translate it into English herself?
Probably.
I would probably pick up definitely Interpreter of Maladies. And Exhalation does sound interesting. I might also pick up that BJ Novak one, and then the Office of Historical Corrections and The Secret Lives of Church Ladies. They all sound really good.
Yay. I've converted you. We all love short stories now.
Yes.
Kelly, no, but I think it's good, Kelly, that you also like have read a few and you're like, I don't think they're for me, but like from I try to like, and you do as well, read outside our comfort zones frequently, because that's the only way to find out like what you should read next.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, I've read all of Stephen King's short stories. Sarah Paretsky has a short story collection that I liked. Joe Hill had a short story collection. So I mean, I do read them. They're just not, I don't know. I need to be better about trying to seek them out, because most of the time it's like, oh, this author I love is doing this, so I will read that. And it's a lot of times easier to figure out like, oh, okay, like this really is not for me if I seek out something that I already, you know, that I don't already have a connection to, if that makes sense.
Veronica Roth, who wrote the Divergent series, has a collection of short stories, The End and Other Beginnings. I've only just read one story from it, but I really liked it. I haven't finished it yet, but that might be one to check out too.
Yeah.
Cool.
I do also like Kindle. Every so often they have like Kindle singles where they have like a short story. There have been, I think, a couple Jennifer Weiner ones and Jodi Picoult. So.
I was just gonna say, Jennifer Weiner also has a really good short story collection. I don't know if either of you have read it. I think I have it, Rach. I'll try to see if I do, and you can borrow it. But I mean, everything she writes, I like. So
I liked that, but I loved Hungry Heart, which is her nonfiction essay collection, which was really, really good.
I loved that.
Yeah, we'll have to do an episode about essay collections, because
I definitely read a lot of those.
Yeah, me too.
And it's so weird that I'm like, give me all the essay collections and maybe 2 short story collections a year tops by authors I already like.
Well, thanks for coming to my presentation about short stories, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for sharing your favorites with us.
Yeah.
They do all sound good.
Yeah.
So that is our show. Don't forget about our Libro FM giveaway. We have details earlier in the episode and in our show notes. And you can also get a book for free if you spend $15 at an indie bookstore of your choosing, either in person or online. And Libro FM will give you a free audiobook. The choices all look great. You can't go wrong with any of them.
That's just this weekend, right?
Yes. The weekend, this coming weekend, April, I think 24th through 26th.
Yep.
And yeah, submit your receipt to Libro FM. We'll have links in the show notes.
Yep.
Great. And be sure to follow us on social media. That gets you entries into the giveaway. So we are WYSR_podcast on Instagram and on Twitter. You can email us at whatyoushouldreadpodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Goodreads, where we, list all the books we talk about. So if you want to, find more information about them, you can be our friend. And please give us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts.
And now you know what you should read.
You're welcome.
You know what you should read.
It's time for What You Should Read, the podcast all about the titles you need. Join 3 book lovers and a guest as they cover all the best new titles to enjoy with your tea.